Hey guys, welcome to the Crypto Life. We're your hosts, Prince and Mike. It is Monday, October 4th, recording right around 9 p.m. Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, what's up, dude? How you doing?
Check it out.
You got the microphone? Look at you. You look like a RSA.
It's too funny. All right.
So, dude, so you read this entire Amber report. I feel like this would be great to just talk about.
I've never really looked into these different ecosystems. I've never really studied the other L1s too closely. And Amber kind of just gave me a quick snapshot of how they're all a little bit different. Some of them are a lot more centralized than what people are made to believe. And the one thing that always I think about is credible neutrality. And I always go back to that. It's really hard to build credible neutrality once you've already made decisions that weren't credibly neutral. For example, Polkadot acquiring 1.88 million DOT tokens in order to validate the network, which is $60 million in today's prices.
Right.
Or Solana having just 20 validators represent over a third of the nodes. And let's see what with Terra is very interesting too. I don't know if it's more centralized or what, but it's got a very complicated staking model. And you can see from the chart that sometimes the staking rewards just shoot up to over 200% APY. And that's because the validators are picking the gas prices for transactions, protocols charging a tax on each transaction as a stability fee. There's also these things called seniorage rewards, which is charged every time a user mints or redeems Terra stablecoins. I don't know, maybe I'm just not super smart on Terra, but it seems like it's kind of complicated. And I don't understand why they charge this 0.1 to 1% tax, and who that really goes to. But the other thing I was thinking about a lot is how their tokens were allocated. Have you ever seen this chart from Masari?
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. And so the red and gray kind of represents insiders and foundations. And you look at blockchains like Solana, Avalanche, Polkadot, very little was available to the public. In Solana, basically nothing was available in public sale. It was all insiders and VCs. When you're trying to build a credibly neutral platform, like a bridge that everyone can use or a public utility, you can't really say your blockchain is, I don't know, I guess a public blockchain, for the public. It's more just a business. Blockchain is a business, I guess.
Yeah. So Peter McCormick had Kobe and then Udi and a bunch of other Bitcoin maxis. And I guess Kobe was the only non-Bitcoin maxi on there on the podcast. And Kobe actually made a really great point kind of about this, where he was saying the ICOs might be right. A lot of people like to preach that because these tokens are available to the public, anybody could get in early and it's not all VCs and private equity money reaping most of the rewards before a company goes public, anybody could get in. And Kobe says, that's not true at all, right? And you can look here at, just look at Solana and Cardano, right? Solana, half of the tokens were distributed to insiders, right? And then it looks like a sliver, a couple percent were offered to the public for sale, right? So the best, whereas Cardano, it's roughly 80%, it looks like, were available for sale to the public, right? So Solana being a great, technical innovation, it's a good project. It wasn't available to the public, right? That went to the VCs. And then the community, regular people who are non-credit investors, insiders without connections can't get access to the best deals. And they have access to these shittier projects and they get dumped on by the VCs who get most of the pump. It's kind of, I don't know. It's funny because a lot of people will pitch tokens and ICOs as democratizing access to early stage investments when, if we're being honest with ourselves, a lot of investors don't have access to the best deals.
Yeah, exactly. Would you have invested in Solana if you got an offer for, private round?
I mean, probably not. I'm too
Yeah.
big of and like, it's really hard to understand the tech too, right? Like
Yeah.
proof of history and stuff like that, which like, there's so many projects with like great sounding white papers, right? And I heard a story of like when Sam Bankman-Fried, when Solana was trying to raise money, what they did was they kind of, to prove how scalable it was, they asked Sam Bankman-Fried and I think it was Alameda was right, because there's FTX and then there's Alameda. I think it was Alameda that made the investment. But basically the engineers tried to break Solana, right? So, and they couldn't break it, right? And it scaled to like some crazy TPS. And SBF was pretty impressed and decided to invest there, right? So you kind of have to just test it in the real life and make sure it works and like to prove it's something out like that. And it's hard to like just understand that just from, it's pretty much impossible to just read a white paper and understand it, right? So again, it kind of like goes to like these insiders, right? They went to SBF, got access to that deal that almost nobody would. And to be fair, like SBF like tested it, right? And he made like a smart decision. But I don't know if this is hindsight bias, but I do think I would have bought if I saw SBF's tweet in January where he said like, sell me all the Solana. Solana was at, I think like $2. And he's like, sell me all the Solana you have and then fuck off to baller tweet.
Yeah, absolutely. Legendary.
But if I saw SBF say that, and that was pretty recently, that was only like 6 months ago, and SBF was like a well-known figure in the space, maybe I would have bought some there. But other than that, I probably wouldn't.
But one thing about, I guess, like credibly neutral systems, and I found this quote on Masari that was pretty good. Crypto networks are inherently new means of incentivizing human behavior. This is demonstrated by the fact that there are thousands of people across the world who are effectively paid by an autonomous protocol for providing validation work, i.e. mining. In order for these experiments to be successful, they need to maintain a sense of credible neutrality such that it is explicit no group are being unfairly targeted. Otherwise, they risk suffering from the same problem that plague the systems crypto hopes to replace. You would never have something like ETH is money as a meme even evolve if the only people who got access to Ethereum in the beginning were VC insiders. You know what I mean? Like money should be a credibly neutral system. Everyone just organically agrees this is very fair. There's no one group that gets money just based off the work of others. I don't know. I want to kind of explore this idea, I guess. Is that why it needs to be credibly neutral and like other blockchains don't need to be, because maybe they're not trying to be money? I don't even think Ethereum was trying to be money when it first set out to do what it's doing. But I guess just because it's so credibly neutral, it's allowed itself to become money.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a really tough question. I think it depends on the use case, right? Like, so money is definitely something that, right, you kind of want to be uncensorable and permissionless and decentralized. And if you're going to store your wealth there, you hope it will be around for the next 100 years, right?
Right.
Whereas, I don't know, this is something I go back and forth on, is how much decentralization is required. And I don't know, I tend to think the vast majority of people, like outside of crypto diehards, don't really care, right? Like,
yeah,
a good analogy I've heard is kind of like a building, right? So if you're going to enter into a building, you don't check like the blueprints and make sure that everything was kind of like built to code or like a bridge, right? You don't check it. You just basically see a bunch of other people do it. And like, if other people are entering the building or crossing the bridge, right? You're like, all right, like it's probably good enough, right? Like you don't even think about it and you just follow their lead. And I think the same analogy could apply to blockchains, right? Where and you kind of see this in Binance, right? Like nobody's reading like Binance Smart Chain's code or really cares about like decentralization. They just want to trade or do whatever the use case they want to on that platform. And they see other people doing it and kind of like testing it out first. Then they'll jump in and kind of do it. And they'll say, it's probably good enough if a million other people are using it, right? But where I would push back on it is I think devs actually do care a lot, right? They want to build on a system that's going to be around for the next 100 years. And decentralization is really important to kind of guarantee that, right? So if devs really care about that, they're going to build like the best applications on top of like the most decentralized. And not all devs care about it, right? Like you see some devs just kind of like building to extract money from certain other L1s. But I do think a lot of people care about it. And you just like look at all the people, especially L2s and rollups some of the smartest people really care about it and are building on top of it. So that's how I would kind of frame it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I guess you're saying like credible neutrality really just lends itself to decentralization and a network being able to last a long time. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Like if, maybe specific groups are targeted or, a system is less credibly neutral, especially for end users.
Yeah, I mean, right? Like Facebook's probably like one of the most hated companies in the world right now, right? And everybody still uses Facebook and Instagram, right? And they don't, in principle, they kind of like don't like it, but they still use it, right? And they're kind of like voting with their feet, right? Even though with their words they might say something different, is my thought. But
it's interesting. Like Solana, top 20 validators control 34% of the network. And they've also, like, insiders have decided that for the next, 10 years, there's going to be a set inflation schedule. If one of these systems like Solana or Terra, Polkadot said, we're going to take 30% of block rewards or staking rewards and give it to the devs to continue building on Solana or Polkadot. I mean, they could do that, right? Because they're not necessarily aiming to be credibly neutral. They're just aiming to be fast blockchains, or in Terra's case, like be able to issue stable coins.
Yeah. I don't know if like Solana could just change the policy like that, right? Like, because they just get so much backlash and they'd consider it, right? And they're trying to establish themselves as like an Ethereum killer. So it's not like in their best interest to kind of do that. My concern would be like if the government wanted to really shut it down, like could they shut it down,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I don't know. Could they shut Solana down? I don't know what that would look like, right? Or maybe like governments will never even want to shut Solana, right? Like outside of China, just because trying to kind of ban it, right? Like if you look at the China ban, right, it's kind of like putting your thumb on like a garden hose that's running, right? Like it doesn't stop the water. The water just sprays everywhere. And like water being like innovation, crypto innovation, right? It just sprayed to other areas of the world. So I don't think it's in like government's interest to really clamp down on it. So are we like overbuilding to protect for like this worst case scenario that might not ever happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, like these are just like all things like I'm trying to like consider.
One thing I read, Vitalik kind of wrote this piece on credible neutrality on Nakamoto.com. And he's got like 4 rules for credible neutrality. Don't write specific people or specific outcomes into the mechanism. 2, open source and publicly verifiable execution. 3, keep it simple. 4, don't change it too often. I think those are all really good rules for, building something. Like if Ethereum wants to be just like a public utility that everyone can access, no one feels like they're being advantaged or disadvantaged by other people using it. And I think if you want to be like a truly global settlement layer, if you want to be money, I guess for Ethereum, it's super important to be credibly neutral. I just don't know how important it is for all of these other chains that are, much more centralized. If they want to do something else, like, does it even matter? Do they even care? And you're probably right. Like they probably care a little bit so that they do have some of that narrative that they pick up on, which is, we can kill Ethereum. But this is why I think they could actually never overtake Ethereum. It's just because they don't have the level of credible neutrality that you need that Ethereum does.
Right. Don't get me wrong. I think credible neutrality is really important, but I don't think that's the argument. If you're trying to convince somebody to, I don't know, get involved in the Ethereum ecosystem, right? I don't think that's the best argument Ethereum has, right? The way I would phrase it is, because most people aren't going to care about it, right? Like they're going to care about where am I going to be able to do the most cool stuff, right? Basically is, I think, and where there's this reflexivity between the end users and like developers as well. But again, this kind of goes back to like the roll-up centric view, is that I think you have to take a 10,000 foot view and say, how is the industry going to scale longer term? And even Solana, right? Like even if Solana centralizes even more, like there's no way that they're running at like a couple thousand transactions per second throughput, and they're already running into scalability issues. If you look at kind of like any type of engineering, right? Like the way to scale is horizontally, not vertically. So, right, like vertically would mean like getting like faster CPUs and more RAM and putting it all in one machine and having an extremely powerful machine. But even like the most powerful CPU in the world is only like 10 times more powerful, like, and only 10 times faster than the cheapest CPU. The way you scale, like if you look at Google, Facebook, etc., what they do is they basically distribute the workload among thousands of commoditized hardware machines. And that's what essentially what the cloud is. And that's how kind of like tech scales in general. And what Solana is trying to do is basically create this L1 that's extremely centralized, and it like, right, like all their nodes have like 256 gigabytes of RAM and like crazy CPU requirements and crazy bandwidth requirements. And that you're going to just reach technical limits at some point. And it's much better to say, hey, Ethereum is going to be this decentralized, credibly neutral settlement layer. And then all these different rollups, which have the capacity of Solana, are going to settle on Ethereum, right? And then you just created thousands of the equivalent of like several orders of magnitude more capacity than Solana. So that would be like kind of my argument of why credible neutrality is important, is because if you're a rollup, right, you're going to just settle on the most secure settlement layer, which is right now, which is where credible neutrality and decentralization come into play. That's kind of how I would phrase it, rather than making more of like an ideological argument and saying these values are important, so everybody should just buy like Ethereum. I would say in game theoretic terms, it's extremely important. It's going to be extremely important longer term. And that's why it's important now. Yeah. Sorry, that's kind of a lot.
No, that's a really good point. The way I'm thinking about it is like the most credibly neutral systems in the blockchain world are the biggest, right? Like you got Bitcoin and Ether, number 1 and 2 on CoinMarketCap. And I just wonder if like you need a lot more credible neutrality for these other chains. Like, I guess my argument would be these other chains don't have credible neutrality, therefore they can never usurp Ethereum in what it does. And
I mean, my pushback there would be like, is this like a correlation causation kind of mistake? Like, is credible neutrality what the cause of like Bitcoin and Ethereum's dominance? I would argue that it's more of like network effects of all the people building on Bitcoin, building on Ethereum, and then like Bitcoin's like institutional adoption and brand name and kind of community.
That's a good point. I think sometimes credible neutrality just gets lost in the fray and people don't really think about it, but it does matter. And I do know a lot of people do care about it.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely important in terms of like a protocol existing for like the next 100 years, right? In terms of like durability of the protocol, I think it's extremely important to not be kind of like dependent on any one entity, right? Or a good point, and an interesting point I heard, I think is from Kobe again, was like, if one person owned all 21 million Bitcoins, it would be worth nothing, which is kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, no, that is interesting to think about.
I think that goes to the credible neutrality point, right? Is that like, because it's like disseminated and incredibly neutral, like is part of where it derives its value.
Yeah. What else you want to talk about, man?
Have you been doing any yield farming or experimenting on L2s at all? Or
yeah, a little bit on L2s. I was playing around with, there's something called Amy.finance, and I don't think their token's launched yet, but it's on Arbitrum, and you can deposit your ETH in the assembly pool, and you can borrow up to 65% of whatever you deposit. So if you deposit $100 worth of ETH, you can withdraw $65 worth of ETH. And one thing you can do with that, which is kind of cool, I had a friend who told me this, you can go to abracadabra.money, and then you can take your borrowed ETH that you borrowed from amy.finance, and you can stake it with abracadabra.money. And you take it to abracadabra.money, you stake it there, and then you borrow a stable coin called MIM. And MIM is tied to the dollar. And then you can take MIM and you can put it with Curve in a Curve pool and farm a token called Spell. So now, you're earning Amy tokens and you're earning this spell token, which is Abracadabra's money token. Abracadabra is like a MakerDAO, and Amy.finance is kind of like, you could almost think of them like an Aave. One thing I did I tell you? I sent USDC from Arbitrum to Coinbase.
Yes. Oh my God. And were you able to recover it, or what they say?
No, wasn't able to recover it. They, I think, are still just working on it. So,
but they think they'll be able to recover it.
Yeah, I mean, USDC is basically centralized, so they can.
So you think he'll get it back, or?
Yeah, I just don't know why it takes so long. Like, I imagined like there's one guy kind of sitting behind the USDC desk. That's Pete Kim, and he sees, oh, Prince, you sent this transaction wrong. Let me just erase it in my ledger, and I'll just write it here.
I do not.
I guess that's not how USDC works. So,
but because like wallet addresses are deterministic, they should be able to just spin up a wallet address and claim it, right? Or no, send it to you.
Yeah, I don't. They should be able to do a lot because it's backed by like Coinbase.
Oh my God, you must, dude. In like a couple minutes after that, were you just freaking out?
Not even a couple minutes. Like I thought I was waiting on Coinbase because I created an address on Coinbase to receive the USDC, sent it from Arbitrum. And the USDC contract has like $190 million on it when I was looking at it. And so I was like, oh, it's got $200 million. I'm sure some people from Arbitrum have sent USDC to Coinbase. Like, they're not all sending it to Arbitrum and then sending it back to mainnet to get it to like Coinbase if they want to get it to their bank account. Like, why would you even launch on Arbitrum if you can't cash it out back to dollars? You have to like go through back to mainnet, then back to Coinbase, then to dollars. It's like, what a process. So after an hour of not receiving the money in Coinbase, I was like, okay, well, something seems to have gone wrong here, and messaged Pete Kim and told him what I had done. And he told me, yeah, we don't support Arbitrum yet. So,
oh my God.
So then he just asked me like, hey, did you file a ticket? What's your email? And I just gave him that. And it's been almost a week. I'll check in with them next week.
Right. I'm sorry.
Not my greatest moment.
People are asking me like the question I've been getting a lot is like what should I do with my ETH, right? Should I stake it? Should I try and like farm it? And it might be helpful to kind of just like talk through that, how we're kind of thinking about it. And we had that interesting conversation this morning about why it might not make sense to use Yearn instead of Curve.
Yeah.
So basically, just to explain it, is I keep like a portion of my ETH in the Curve pool. So Curve stake ETH pool. So we kind of explained this on the last podcast, right? What stake ETH is. And Lido, the DAO that organizes stake ETH, will issue Lido tokens to kind of subsidize the pool to kind of make a market for staked ETH and ETH be close to 1-to-1, right? So that people can deposit staked ETH and withdraw ETH and vice versa. Because like staked ETH earns like 5%, you get roughly half of that, which is like 2.5 to 3% in regular yield from the from the pool. And then you can, from the subsidy from Lido and Curve, you get like an additional 5 or 6%. So you're coming out with 8 or 9% in regular yield. And what I asked you about this morning was apparently Yearn.finance will, right? Like you can stake your Curve tokens with them, and they will compound those Lido rewards into the staked ETH pool, right? So you don't have to, so you get the compounding benefit, right? The Lido is not just accruing separately. And I didn't realize they apparently take a 2 and 20 fee on that. And then you have to pay gas fees as well.
Yeah, you have to pay gas fees. Well, gas fees are kind of spread out between the entire contract, or like whoever's using Yearn. So gas fees are pretty small. So, but they do get split up among everyone.
Yeah, I think the gas when I was like depositing it was like $400 to get into that pool.
Yeah,
which is, it's like crazy expensive, right? So you could, it wouldn't make sense to, unless you're like a massive whale, to Like even to compound it like weekly, right? Like would be like you just pay a lot of gas.
Yeah. So just to clarify what you're saying. So right now, if you go, there's two different ways to get yield on your ETH. If you're going through this curve pool, you can put it in with, the ETH, staked ETH, and you get staked ETH rewards, you get curve tokens, and you get Lido tokens. And all in, that is about 9% APY, maybe 8 or 9%, somewhere around there. Or you could use Yearn, which is kind of a money manager. You give your ETH to Yearn. And what they do is they take the ETH, or they take the curve and the Lido rewards that you earn, and they automatically sell that for more ETH. And they take the ETH that they got, and then they just re-compound it with the ETH that's already in the staked ETH pool on Curve. So it's just auto compounding, and with the auto compounding and selling the Curve and the Lido, you're getting maybe closer to 10%. But for that 1%, 1 to 2% additional yield, you're paying 2 and 20. So your net returns are probably a little bit lower overall.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize that there was that additional Yearn fee on top of it.
Yeah. Right now, I like DeFi, but I also like CeFi. I think if you're looking for yield on your ETH, you have to decide, okay, am I going to go the DeFi route or the CeFi route? And generally for me, I, maybe have like 2 or 3% of my total ETH on the DeFi side, and like 95% plus on the CeFi side, earning a yield. By CeFi, I mean like the big crypto lenders like BlockFi, Celsius, Gemini, Genesis. I mean, there's so many, right? Like Blockfolio, for example, if you have less than $10,000 worth of ETH, you can put it on Blockfolio and they'll give you 8% on ETH. I generally stay away from the players that give you like their own token as interest payments, like Celsius or Nexo or crypto.com, just because, they're, I don't know, they just seem a little bit shadier to me.
No, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. In the DeFi side, I mean, the biggest risk is just smart contract risk. There's probably not a lot with Curve and the staked ETH pool, but if you're doing like more degenerate yield farming, like RB Nyan, Nine, or Amy.finance and Spell with Abracadabra money, and you're bridging your ETH to different farms on different chains or L2s or side chains. Like, yeah, you want to do that with a very small amount of ETH, depending on your risk tolerance. Like, because there is a good chance that you can get rugged or scammed. But if you want to just get like, a healthy 8 or 9% on it, yeah, I think the Curve pool is probably pretty low risk. I mean, there's over 4.5 billion of capital last I checked in that pool.
Yeah, it keeps going up, which hurts my rewards.
Yeah, your yields are getting diluted.
Yeah, exactly. Would you ever consider going over to like other L1s with that kind of DeFi money?
Yeah.
Like Avalanche, or have you tried any of those? Or
I've tried Polygon, and it was a really good experience. Polygon's really fast. It reminds me of Arbitrum. I haven't used Solana or Avalanche or Bridge to, those other chains. You've used Solana, right?
Yeah, I've used Solana. The Phantom wallet it's like a great UX. It's super fast. It's pretty seamless. Like your transactions go really fast. And I see why that's super enticing for a lot of people. Just because, right?
Yeah.
Especially like if you don't have like a lot of ETH, and gas fees will just eat your entire stack, just trying to move it around. It's like unusable if you have like unless you meet like a certain like minimum wealth requirement. But Solana, right? I don't think it felt like I didn't pay any fees, and it was super fast, and I can see why that's super compelling.
Have you used Arbitrum?
I have not yet. I've been busy, but I will use Arbitrum. I was thinking of even like just going, it's probably like a little late now because a lot of the smart money got into like Avalanche and all of the kind of yield farming that was going on there. But I mean, we follow these people on Twitter, right? And like we know pretty like up to date when it starts, right? You don't want to be like at the tail end because you're just gonna get dumped on. But like right when it starts, like rushing in, like it's kind of like a race. Like and like you get in, you mine it, and then get out before you get rugged. But I would like to start trying that, just with like a very small percentage of my stack.
Yeah, I ask because like I wonder, because you could actually compare the speeds between Solana and Arbitrum and actually see like which one's faster, or what the experience has been like. I mean, you've used MetaMask before, right? I mean, it's just like you do a transaction, MetaMask pops up, you press confirm. That's really it. And it just gets verified instantly. Is Phantom kind of the same way? Like, do you have to do anything extra? Like you want to make a transaction, Phantom wallet pops up, you just hit confirm and boom, it's verified.
Yeah. My brother was like, I sent you some Sol. And then I checked my wallet and it was like there, right? Which is not the case, right? With MetaMask, you have to go check Etherscan and see how long until it gets confirmed, right? And then,
but not with Arbitrum though. Arbitrum is like it's literally instant. Yeah.
Oh, really? No, I have to try Arbitrum. Although Arbitrum's fees are like $1 or $2 per transaction, right? Like about that.
It depends what you're doing. Like if I'm just sending ETH to you, it's like nothing. If I am doing a Uniswap transaction, it might be like $3-4, but I think they just haven't like scaled out yet. Like they haven't raised, they're still kind of like in, gated testing, I guess. And when they let that open and they kind of distribute more of the fees across more users, it should go down a lot. That's what I've heard.
Right. No, I've heard that as well. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Where else are you telling people to get yield on ETH other than Curve? Or
the easiest way is just, I personally think, is like Coinbase, like especially if you're not super technical and you don't want to monitor it or have to worry about anything at all. You just stake it on Coinbase and you earn 5%, and you could see your interest accruing every day, right? Like every second. And it's pretty cool. I have like a good portion of my ETH on Coinbase staking. And I was gonna run the validators, like I was telling you about that, right? So I went and I spent $800 for an NUC.
Did you return that, by the way?
No, I didn't return it. Well, I threw out the box, so I got to see. I don't know if I can return it. It's right here on my desk.
I did this last summer. I ordered a DApp node for around $800, and no, it wasn't a DApp node. It was just a regular like Nook NUC.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Yeah, so I ordered an NUC. It's around $800. I installed Ubuntu on it, tried to get Prism to like start validating on it, just like ran through all these issues with DApp node. DApp node was like, I was trying to install DApp node on the Nook, and DApp node just wouldn't install and couldn't work. So I was just like, all right, I give up. I tried for like a week and then I returned the Nook.
Really? I should look into returning it. It's just sitting on my desk.
I bought it on Amazon.
I bought it on Amazon as well. I should return it. I gotta see if I could do it. I just don't have a box. And like, how do you return stuff with Amazon without a box? But I was in the same, I ran like the test. I ran a validator on the test net for, I don't know, like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, this like worked pretty well, right? Like I downloaded Ubuntu. I ran it on DigitalOcean, which is kind of like similar to AWS. It's just kind of like a cloud server that you could just rent. Was running it, like it was accruing the rewards and everything was going great. And it worked pretty seamlessly. And I was like, all right, like I think I'm ready to do it. Then I ordered this Nook and then I was going to do it. And just the idea of sending it to kind of like the validator contract, right? Like sending like a lot of ETH to that validator contract and like not being able to withdraw it for like a year or 2 years. And like, what if I like screw something up? And I was like, it's just not worth like the stress, right? Like, I wasn't so much worried about like keeping the node running, and just because the penalties for like not keeping it running are very small. What I was more worried about was if I screwed something up, I sent it to the wrong contract or something like that. I screwed up the withdrawal process or my keys. And for me, I was just like, let me put a portion in Curve. Let me put the majority on Coinbase, and Coinbase is pretty just peace of mind, right? I don't have to worry about it, right? Coinbase has it. and they're like a $50 billion company. So
yeah, it's probably good that you didn't validate yourself, because you were able to go into the staked ETH pool on Curve, and now you're also getting Lido rewards, you're getting Curve rewards. Are you holding on to those rewards, or are you selling them?
I am holding on to them. I'm super bullish on Lido.
And what do you think about Curve?
I really like Curve too, right? Apparently, like Curve has the smartest developers in the space. They're like geniuses who work there, and I think the model makes a lot of sense. I haven't like done my homework in terms of like how much in fees they kind of collect and like the tokenomics of it all, right? Like how many of the tokens will ever exist and stuff like that. But overall, I generally like it, but the Curve rewards aren't that much. I think it's like 30 basis points per year, right? So it's not that much Curve. It's much more Lido. And I really like Lido just because you kind of get, it's kind of like a tax on all of the validators of all L1s, right? Just because they get a percentage of all staking rewards, and they're on Solana.
Yeah, staking is the future. So
yeah, staking is the future.
Staking fees from Solana network. What else are they on? Obviously on Ethereum.
They're on Terra. I think that might be it. I think it might be, I don't know. I can pull up their website. But yeah, they basically get 10% of those. I think 5% goes to the validators actually running the nodes, and then 5% goes to the DAO or the protocol.
Amazing. So you're getting 9% on your ETH, of which 6% is kind of equity in Curve and Lido, both of which are probably great projects and should do really well in like a 5-year investment time frame, hopefully.
No, I'm super bullish on it. And like, I probably won't even convert that to ETH when I withdraw. Like, I'll just keep the Lido. Yeah. And like the other good aspect too is that it's super liquid, which can come in handy, right? Like if you want to withdraw it. And that actually helped when I bought that punk, right? And flipped that punk. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had it all, because I was going to stake before kind of like NFT summer. So
I thought you might have forgotten about that punk.
I'm trying to forget, but dude, I just saw another one. The most recent hoodie sold for like $1.4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 450 ETH.
You just can't look at it. I'll just cope and just say like, I'm happy.
I still remember when you called me, you were like, yeah, I'm like shaking. I'm like thinking about buying this punk. It's so much money. It was like 90 ETH back then.
Yeah. And we thought that was like a lot, right? Like the floor now of all punks is like 120 ETH.
Yeah.
Should we talk about NFTs and like our views on
about NFTs? But before we do, you got to tell everyone what you sold it for. It's still a profit.
Yeah, it's still a profit. So I made like 25 ETH on it. So I sold it for 115 ETH, which looks like so low for a punk.
But one saving grace about that is like you sold it in less than 12 hours after you bought it.
Right. So
you made 25 ETH in 12 hours.
Right. So I guess you can't complain about. And that's kind of like how I was like looking at it. I was like, oh, like if I just like list it like 30% above where I bought it, and then I went to bed that night and I like wake up at like 3:30 in the morning and I like check my phone and I like scroll through the CryptoPunk spot on Twitter and I see that mine got hit and I'm like, oh my God, I got hit. So I look and I go on, right. Naturally, I'm like wide awake. My heart's like racing. I like look and I go on my computer and I check my Ledger wallet to see if the ETH is there, and there's no ETH there, and there's no punk anymore. So I check Etherscan, and no punk and no ETH in there, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, did I screw something up or what? Whatever. There's no ETH. Like, there's supposed to be a lot of ETH in there, and I go and check, and apparently with Larva Labs is you have to withdraw the ETH. So when it's bought, like Larva Labs smart contract will hold it, and then you have to withdraw from there. It doesn't just get transferred to you automatically. So it took me a while to figure that out. And like, I like literally just thought I just like lost a punk for nothing and like I screwed something up. So that was a fun night.
Yikes. Yikes. But wow, what a story though.
Yeah, it's a good story. It'll just like a priceless asset that like I'll never be able to buy back again. And I'll just say like, I owned it for 12 hours.
Yeah. Well, what are you doing in the NFT space now? Are you buying anything? Are you Nowadays, it seems like everyone's in crypto toads. Have you heard of these things?
there's it's like an 11 floor in those. And like people are saying it's the next loot. Have you been following it?
No, not really. I mean, some of them look kind of cool, but I don't understand how it's related to loot or what. I think people like them more because at least unlike loot, you get a picture with your tag.
Yeah, so $40,000 picture.
It probably sounds so ignorant, like not knowing anything about this project. I mean, 11
Yeah.
floor for like literally these are like pixelated frogs. Like they're not even like, well drawn or anything.
For the next pod, I will read up on toads and like come with a more informed opinion. I just don't know anything about them, but they're kind of funny looking. They're like good, very memeable, And there's like this interesting dynamic in the NFT space, right? Where you have all these people who made a ton of money on these NFTs, right? And they've amassed these really great collections. And now they're kind of like tastemakers, which is they have this really interesting ability now to, right? They could take a project that has like a 1/8 floor and they could buy a bunch of it and say like, this is going to be the next big thing. And because they were so successful in the past and people kind of trust their judgment, the floor on those things was kind of skyrocket, right? And they're able to monetize their reputation in kind of a way. I mean, you can kind of see like 3 Hours Capital can kind of monetize their reputation by saying like, oh, we like AVAX or whatever, and people go out and buy it. But it's real with these projects, there's like, right, there's 1,000, sometimes there's like 1,000 or 500 in total circulation, right? And then they'll go up and buy like 5 of them, or better yet, they're in a Discord with like 5 or 10, with like 30 other very influential people in the space. And then they'll all collude to each buy like 2 or 3, right? And there you have like 100 of the supply were just taken off the market and they're pumping it on Twitter. And not to say like there's anything, not to like accuse them of doing anything, but it's this kind of weird dynamic where like Dino Pals is probably the best example. There's like 100 Dino Pals in circulation. And I think like Suzu of 3 Hours bought one, Kobe bought one. A bunch of people have like these little dinosaurs, right? And because there's only 100 of them, they were able to like just say like the floor's at $70, it's 70 ETH because we say it is, right? So it's super interesting, and I'm curious how it all ends. I haven't been buying just because I keep waiting for a bear market that doesn't ever seem to come. Although I do like, my favorite project is Chromie Squiggles. I think I know you don't like the squiggles, but I think it's,
so what are the squiggles? Because like I really don't know anything about the squiggles. Like, what do you like about them? From my point of view, like they are just squiggly lines.
Right. Which is like the absurdity that kind of like makes it such a great meme too, right? And it's very recognizable, which is huge, I think, in the NFT space. Like anybody could see it and recognize it as a Chromie squiggle. And like, how valuable is that? Like a lot. Like even people like not in the space, like can kind of like seen that image before, right? And they'll know it. And like that makes it kind of valuable, right? Like I'm sure you could value a lot of these pieces by the recognizability of like how many people would recognize this piece, right? Like that seems correlated with the value of a lot of these pieces. What I really like about it though, and the NFTs I think will make it, are like the historically significant NFTs, right? So punks obviously are like the apex asset of NFTs, just because they were kind of like first, they're innovative, they're like have like crypto ethos, and Snoop Dogg and Gary Vee and Jay-Z all have, and Odell Beckham all, right? There's a celebrity status to them. They're just cemented as like the number one NFT, and they're like very historically important. They inspired the ERC 721 standard, right? So I like projects like that. Like Autoglyphs is another good example, where it's like the first on-chain generative art, right? And the floor for those are like 400 ETH, which is kind of insane. That's a lot of money, but right, like that's historically significant, and that'll be around for a while. And then Chromie Squiggles was like the first art blocks project, right? So you had some like really big art blocks projects, right? You have Ringers, you have Fidenzas, and like a bunch of other like art blocks curated project. And Chromie Squiggles, I'm pretty sure that was from the founder of art blocks. Like he was really into generative art, and he kind of created Chromie Squiggles to kind of show what was possible, where this art was just generated from a hash, right? A hash was fed into this algorithm that output a bunch of these diverse Chromie Squiggles. They all look different. They all have different attributes. And it was kind of like the first of its kind.
What are they trading at now, and how many Chromie squiggles are there?
There's 10,000 in total supply. The floor is like 13 or 14 ETH right now. And there's like hyper squiggles, right? Like there's ones that like have like every spectrum of, I actually don't know a lot about colors, but I think it's like every like color spectrum, every possible color, it has it. And that sold for something crazy, like 400 ETH or maybe more. I got to look up the price of this crummy squiggle. It sold for a lot, right? So, and then there's some people who, there's like fuzzy squiggles, there's ribbed squiggles, there's regular squiggles, there's hyper squiggles. It's kind of funny, but like I think there's like 7 or 8 different kinds in total. So people are trying to collect horizontal, like Punk 6529, like a very influential like NFT collector. He's trying to collect across the squiggles horizontally, holding one of each, right? Because he's saying like nobody will ever be able to acquire one of these, right? Like Chrissy's or Sotheby's will want to like auction like an entire Chromie Squiggles collection, right? And like I think G Money has taken like a similar approach, but it's really interesting. And I think it's historically significant, which I think is the most important part, just because you have so much supply coming online, which I personally think the supply is going to kind of burst the NFT bubble. But
supply
historically
projects.
Yeah, there's so many new projects coming on and like great new projects.
I totally agree with you. Like I think the new projects are kind of saturated with the NFT traders, the guys who just want to flip profile pictures for more ETH, hopefully overnight, kind of like you did. The guys who are really collectors, like, and I've spoken to a guy who has a fairly significant NFT portfolio, and he's telling me like, there's guys with like billions of dollars who are coming into this and they want, the best of the best. They want Fidenzas and Ringers and Punks and, just like the best stuff. Like with that kind of capital probably coming in, those things are not going to just burst like everything else. My guess is like once ETH or Bitcoin start moving up a lot more, like, the traders are going to see, okay, I can just make more money holding ETH or Bitcoin and I'm going to stop flipping. And everyone who probably got in to just flip is probably just going to sell their NFTs quickly and just get back into ETH, whatever they can. Might be a fire sale.
Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be a fire sale. And
the collectors are going to keep their pieces, Yeah,
like
they're diamond handing everything they own.
The flippers are increasingly priced out, right? Like 120 ETH floor punks, right? Like you have to be pretty wealthy to own those. And like the thing about like super wealthy people is they don't have to sell, right? Like they
have enough money. They care more about the status symbol.
Right. And it's a bad look to be undercutting floors, right? So, and they'll be scooping up the people who do. And it's increasingly the pristine asset NFTs are being allocated from like the weekends and the flippers to these strong hand, ultra wealthy people who are just never going to sell. So I'm worried, like that's kind of like the bull case, right? For a lot of these assets. But the bear case, what I would think is, right, like we're just kind of like scratching. NFTs are so new and we don't know what they might turn into, right? There's audio NFTs, right? There's going to be video game assets. There's going to be things we can't even imagine, right? Like metaverse type assets, like land and like Decentraland and stuff like that. And there's going to be all these cool things that people are going to want to buy, and there'll be like the first X NFT that we can't imagine, right? Like kind of like what Punks did to NFTs, right? There'll be another project that like creates some totally new use case that will be totally new, and that will be the first of that, right? And like that's going to be an ultra valuable project too, right? And that's going to happen for like the next decade. And there's going to be tons of new pristine Apex asset NFTs, but there's only a finite amount of ETH in circulation, right? So that's what I keep coming back to. It's like, there's not going to be enough ETH to go around for all of the innovation that's going to happen in the space. And the best way to kind of play this is to hold your ETH, and then you can earn interest, right? You could earn almost 10% on that, right? And then right now, I feel like there's a lot of greed in the NFT market. And everybody's going to want to come back into ETH at some point, right? People are in all these other L1s, they're in like Solana for like the pump, and like they don't believe in the project longer term, right? Like people like Kobe who have like big Solana positions was saying, like he said on the podcast today that I was listening to with Peter McCormick, he's like, other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, like Bitcoin and Ethereum are the only project you feel comfortable with, like just owning for like the next 30 years and not looking at it, right? Like those are the only two projects where he feels comfortable that they'll be around in 30 years, right? So there's not a lot of people people are going into there to those because that's where capital is flowing into and they're trying to front run that. But when they eventually try to come back to ETH from NFTs, from L1s, there won't be enough ETH to go around, especially after like the burn and like kind of it goes deflationary. So that's kind of why I can't justify, but like I'd like to buy like a pudgy penguin, but still like even like 2 ETH, I like can't bring myself to do it. I'm like, no, just hold the ETH and like ETH's gonna be worth a lot of money. So and like you'll be able to buy it in a bear market when people are kind of scared and start to realize that.
Oh, so you do believe in a bear market?
An NFT bear market? Well, I've been saying for
an NFT bear market. Okay. Yeah. The approach I've kind of taken is, okay, I'm earning some kind of interest on the ETH I have by lending it to, CeFi parties. And I can take that interest, and because I'm not selling any of my ETH, I feel better about buying NFTs with it or diversifying into some other project. That seems like a good way of, not feeling like, okay, I'm going to sell my ETH to speculate on an NFT and hopefully it appreciates or, take some other kind of chance. Because you definitely want to hold on to your ETH for as long as you can. And if you can just speculate on the interest you get, it feels like so much better. It feels a lot less risky.
Yeah. I mean, like for some of these projects, right? Like an autoglyph, like look at an autoglyph, it has a 400 ETH floor, right? So you buy an autoglyph and you give up 400 ETH for that. That's 40 ETH a year, right? And interest that you would also be foregoing, right? And I feel like people are doing that calculation when they go and buy these projects. And I feel like eventually it'll start to get priced in when people just kind of realize like, hey, like, right, the rule of 72 is like divide 72 by whatever interest you're receiving. And that's like how many years it would take you to double your money. So earning 10%, right? You would double your money in 7.2 years. So roughly 7 years, you double your money just earning 10%. And that's in ETH, right? Like they're not making any more ETH, right?
Yeah.
So like it's hard. I feel like a lot of people are caught up in the hype, and I do think NFTs will be valuable, especially the pristine ones. But I would rather buy when people start panicking.
Yeah, me too, Mike.
But like your friend said, there's like, that was part of my punk thesis too, right? Like punks are the pristine asset, the apex asset of the metaverse. And so there's 10,000 punks. And I was listening to a podcast with the Larva Labs founders. They think 30 to 40% of those were lost, right? So really there's only like 6,000 or 7,000 outstanding. And then you could, maybe like 2,000 of those are like cool, right? Like cool looking punks. And there's like 3,000 billionaires in the world. Right? So like not even every billionaire, right? Like my thesis is like A-list celebrities are going to be priced out of these things. Everybody's going to be priced out of these things, right? And you're going to have the chance to own like this pristine asset, a priceless asset.
Yeah, I've kind of given up on punks for myself personally. Like I feel like I've constantly feel like I missed the boat on NFTs, and I've just come to terms with the fact I'm not going to own a punk, and that's okay. Like. Yeah, I'm happy just owning ETH. One thing you
had a really good point when I was kind of like talking to you about this is like, and your kind of view is that you should never like really sacrifice, right? Because kind of like you could view like ETH and like money in general as like freedom, right? Like it's kind of eases your worries, right? Like the point of, right? Like I agree with your philosophy on money, where like the point of money isn't to like buy really nice things. It's to kind of like
less worries,
have less worries, right?
Yeah.
And that's like I kind of agree with that. And there's like a lot of people like putting a lot of money in very illiquid JPEGs that they might not be able to sell, right? And risk putting themselves in like a dire position that they're like ultimately sacrificing that freedom, that like hard-earned freedom that they might like, I don't know. Yeah. To me, the point of money is like to just be able to work on stuff I want to work on and not.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you don't want money to take up so much of brain space, really. Like right. You want to, at least for me personally, like I want to take that time and either build cool things, spend it with friends and family, enjoy life, eat fine food, like the good things.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you have like, right, like thousands of ETH and like you can afford like a punk, like that's cool. Buy one, right? Like, right? Like that's great. Like, but if you're kind of on the edge, right? Like I think there's like a rule, like if you can't afford to buy it twice, you can't afford it, right? So
That's a good
I
rule.
feel
I
like
haven't
that's
heard that one before.
I feel like that's a good motto.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. What do you want to say anything else about NFTs? It's kind of been running pretty long.
No, I think we covered a lot today. I thought it went well.
Yeah, I think so too. All
Have
right.
you watched Squid Games?
Oh my God. I'm so glad you brought this up. I just finished the first episode right before this podcast.
Oh, dude.
Wait, don't spoil it. But
I'm just gonna tell you how the season ends.
oh yeah, okay. No, the first episode was great. I actually met another guy here in Toronto. He's kind of been bankless, and I was like, just hit him up. And like, as we were walking out of the restaurant, he was telling me like, "Hey, have you seen Squid Games?" And I was like, "No, but I heard about it." And then came home, watched the first episode, and I thought it was so good.
Dude, it's so intense. Like I told you, I was like looking for a show to start like winding down after work.
Yeah,
I chose that show, right? Because it's like an international sensation. But like I watch it like before I go to bed, and I'm like pumping like adrenaline because it's like so intense. I'm like, just
wait,
it's
so
just
have you
funny.
finished it?
I finished it. Yeah.
How many episodes is it?
I think there's 9 episodes
Okay.
in the first season. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I would recommend it. I thought it was good. I feel like I watched it in Korean with the English subtitles just because the voiceovers. Did you do the English voiceovers?
Yeah, I did English voiceovers just because we thought we were just going to have it on in the background. We didn't want to read subtitles, but we were like so drawn to it. We might just have to do episode 2 with the actual Korean.
Yeah, the English voiceovers I thought were pretty terrible, but yeah, awesome show.
All right, cool. Well, that's the recommendation for the week.
Yeah, pure alpha.
All right, guys, this has been great, man. If you guys have questions or comments, email us at thecryptolifepod@gmail.com, and we'll be back next week. I guess we didn't really do this last week. We kind of skipped a week, but we'll try and do this weekly, but we might miss a week here or there. No promises.
Yeah. If anything, I feel like less is good. I mean, I just feel like there's so many podcasts to keep up. It's impossible, right? So
Yeah.
we're helping making your lives easier.
Yeah, exactly. Less is more. Great point. All right, Mike. I'll catch up with you soon.
All right, catch you later. Bye.
Bye.